Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our weekly office hours. My name is George Soto, one of the co founders here at AssetMule, joined by, of course, my lovely and awesome co founder and CEO, Justin Dorfman, who I missed so much. We were hanging out last week, but I won't get too soft here today on this. But today we're going to dive in. We got a super special guest that I'm very, very excited about diving into the topic with here today, which is how to build an ABM program with your existing tech and team. Like there's a huge fallacy that, you got to really buy this heavy software and build these crazy teams and all this stuff. And I think Scrappy ABM, which we'll dive into some of those details here in a second, have really perfected that. Mason Cosby, how are you?
I'm great. I'm waiting for the special guest you've got this week. So I'm excited for them to be here.
No, I got to tell you that Justin and I were tickling in our toes here, waiting for this session with you, because not only do we want to learn more, but we just know that for the go-to-market professionals out there, you're going to add a lot of value, and everybody's trying to figure it out, right? I think I've been sort of aware of ABM for the last, 8 or 9 years, right? And as a category, and people trying to figure it out. And what's so interesting is that people are still trying to figure it out. And I think what y'all have been able to do is awesome, make it approachable and those sort of things. So real quick, for just some housekeeping for the folks out there, if you have any questions, comments, feedback, you're probably watching this on LinkedIn and or YouTube. Maybe you have your double screen on. Go ahead and put those comments, questions, feedback in there, and we'll get to them. If it's an urgent question, go ahead and let us know, because you got to go and grab your smoothie or kombucha in between meetings. Otherwise, we'll dedicate the kind of second part of this session to Q&A. However, we do like to make these a little more conversational, so you're just not staring at our faces out there, folks. So without further ado, Justin, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, Mason, so great to have you on the live here, and really excited to dig into this topic. I guess to start, maybe we can, for those that aren't familiar with you, maybe give a little bit about your background. And the first question I have for you that you can lead into is, why is there this misconception, right? Why do most folks feel like you have to spend a ton of money on tech, have this massive team to start an ABM program? And by the way, I was there, right? I think 5 years or 6 years ago, I was building my first ABM program, and every playbook that I downloaded, everybody that I followed online, this was pre-Scrappy ABM days, right? Was talking about all these marketing automation tools and, heavy CRMs and how we have to connect them together and bring in I don't think the term RevOps existed back then, but some sort of marketing operations person to help you do that. And then there was the lead tools and all that stuff. So really excited just to hear your perspective. But yeah, maybe an intro and then leading into that question of why is there this misconception? And maybe how did you stumble across the fact that you didn't have to take that approach? It would be really interesting to hear.
Yeah, so the long and short, I started in sales, selling advertising, then landed in a vertical SaaS company. Someone explained the concept of ABM to me, and having come from a sales background, and then again, working in vertical SaaS, so very defined market, when ABM was introduced, I was like, well, what is everybody else doing? That made so much sense. Determine your best customers, market to them. Crazy concept. And also I don't know, work with sales. Because from my perspective, the goal of marketing is to raise awareness that converts into pipeline. So if we're getting a bunch of people that sales that want to work with that won't close, it seems like a big waste of time and money. So that was where I learned about ABM, was actually in that vertical SaaS company, talking with an agency. And then I realized I'm really dumb and I don't know nearly enough about this topic or this concept. So I ended up working in an agency that was an ABM agency. And I was hired as the marketer for the agency, which is still to this day, my favorite in-house job of all time, because I marketed marketing to marketers. So my whole job was learn about ABM, teach ABM, and then help people figure it out. And my boss came to me at that company and said, hey, we have one seller. We've got a part-time RevOps person. We have a HubSpot CRM and marketing automation platform. We've got data enrichment. And then you've got a small gifting budget. But that's all you've got. So I need you to build an ABM program. It's oh, cool. But talk to all of our clients, like how it's super expensive. I'm like, they need resourcing. It's like, what budget do I have? And I was told, you're the budget. And I was like, awesome. So I had to figure out how to make an ABM program work. And I realized at a marketing agency, how you market is how you're judged. So if you do a poor ABM program as an ABM agency, people aren't going to trust you to do ABM. So we ended up figuring it out on like essentially rubbing two sticks together, but made a decent bit of money. In my first year, sourced about 1.8 million in revenue at a 56% close rate. And that was me and like one seller. And the ROI on that was insane because I was paid like $6 a year. So, pretty easy. And then from there, ended up getting acquired by the world's most awarded B2B agency. So I built an ABM program to cross-sell and upsell and sold 9 million in 6 months. And then ended up out of that working in a sales enablement company, learning a ton about modern day selling. And that was kind of the final thing that I needed to round out the kind of philosophy and approach to Scrappy ABM. So launched Scrappy ABM, and then we're here. So that's the background of how we got here and kind of where Scrappy ABM was born.
Awesome. I guess, as you think about your clients and they come to you and they say, I see the name Scrappy ABM, I see you on LinkedIn talking about, you don't need all this tech and tools and team members to start this program. Tell me how to get started, right? Like, how do I start an ABM program? What's your advice to them? What's the first thing that a marketing team should do to sort of lay the foundation for a Scrappy ABM program?
Yeah, I want to give credit where credit is due for a lot of the frameworks that we are using. So COO Greg Toller has done a wonderful job of putting some frameworks and processes to my word vomiting. Otherwise, it would be way less controlled. So what I did when I was building my first ABM program was I just took inventory of the data that we had available, the channels that we had, the content that we had. And then, again, ABM is a resource heavy approach. So I was just trying to be resourceful. So I didn't have that many resources. So I had to be very resourceful with what I had. And what I knew we had is a team of experts that could share their expertise. So when I'm looking at how do you get started, look at what you have to get started. And I know that sounds very basic, but start taking inventory of like, oh yeah, we're already like running a paid media program. We're already doing a content syndication program. We're already doing outbound. We're already doing these webinars. We're already doing these events. And like when you do ABM really well, ABM isn't a tactic. Like it is a strategy and it's an intentional way of progressing in an account. So admittedly, when you do an ABM program, the more I've worked with clients, they're like, oh, we thought there'd be like some kind of a different secret sauce type thing. It's like, no, it's still the basic channels. It's just used differently in a very intentional approach. So I would map out all your current programs and how you're currently going to engage your audiences. And then mapping those out of what's the intent here? Like, are we trying to generate awareness? Or are we trying to convert a meeting? And if you map out all your current programs and their intent at this stage, you'll figure out, oh, we actually have some pretty big gaps. Like at no point do we educate on the problem. We're only feature dumping. We're just talking about our solution, but never educating on the problem. Or, man, we talk a lot about problems. Like we are such a Debbie Downer. At no point do we actually offer a solution. So and another way of thinking about that, people are very bottom of funnels, like they're very product heavy, or other people are like very thought leadership heavy. I would actually say we're pretty thought leadership heavy. I probably need to talk about our solutions more, but I mostly talk about problems because that is where I find people struggle the most. So again, taking inventory of what you have today, how you can map all those programs out and their intended goals is the best way to actually get started with an ABM program. And the last thing, and then I'll shut up. Stages to think through would be awareness, initial engagement, meaningful engagement, marketing qualified account, sales qualified account, and opportunity. And what those functionally mean is like, do they know we exist? Do they have a problem? Do we know they're exploring viable solutions in some capacity? MQA is like, do they understand our solution, which would be like product page, pricing page, schedule, call page. SQA is they've actually booked a meeting and they're qualified for timing and budget. They should already be qualified based on like fit because in your target account list. And then lastly is opportunity is like, we're actually working the deal. So if you can map all your programs to those stages and have clear goals, you'll actually have a good starting point for an ABM program.
you basically spoke to my question, which was how do you get started, like with implementing an ABM, which is awesome. So maybe we can sort of unpack a couple things because it sounds to me like a lot of, or not a lot, but portions of what you were articulating was like our story and what sounded like product marketing ish type stuff. So if you're a team out there, and I know this is sort of relative to the way that you're constructed as an organization, but if you're a team out there and you're like, all right, we got to do this assessment, we got to understand the story, all these sort of things that, you talked about the intent, what's our goal, those sort of things, right? If you're a team who's like, okay, let's do it, like who should we bring together, right? Should it just be, because you know how it is, like we sit there as a marketing team, we're in a silo, and then sales has their own sort of thing that they're thinking through. We see this across the board misalignment for the last 20 years. It still hasn't been solved, unfortunately, at most organizations. So like, who do you bring together to start to do that, and what's that like first actionable thing that folks can do?
Yeah. So I'm going to take a step back, and sorry, I'm going to be a Debbie Downer for a moment and talk through all the reasons an ABM program would fail, because the way that I think through it is identifying the reasons your program would fail, and then starting there is the best way to get started, because if you solve all the reasons it would fail, you win by default. So top 5 reasons would be lack of sales and marketing alignment, lack of executive buy-in, lack of resourcing, lack of measurement capabilities, and then lack around targeting. Targeting is typically where I recommend starting, because if you can nail targeting, a couple things happen naturally. You've got to get executives bought in and aligned, and you've got to get sales aligned as well. So I typically recommend starting with targeting, but also if you are like, cool, like I'm a guy that's running all of marketing and sales, probably don't do an ABM program. And like, I'm sorry, it's hard. And I want to be super clear. I did it, but I worked at an agency that was an ABM agency, and I led most everything, but I could pull in a resource here and there when I needed it. Most people don't have that blessing when they're the solo team. It's easier when your product is people that do marketing, because you can pull them in as you need it. So from that perspective, counterintuitive advice, go talk to finance first. A couple of reasons. One, what finance has that is underutilized in ICP development is client profitability. So when I look at the idea of best customer, best, generally speaking, are the ones that pay us the most and cost us the least, aka profit. And when you start with a profit first approach, you end up looking at what are the criteria that actually made these customers super profitable. And then once you've got that list nailed down of, okay, these are our top 20 or top 30 most profitable customers, then you go over to CS and you talk to CS and potentially product, and you say, who's actually using the product the most? Who has really high NPS scores? Who complains a lot? Like, you figure out the things that are happening on the actual customer side from a profit perspective to then better understand, oh, our most profitable customers are also typically the ones that are the most happy. They're actively using the product. They're actually using the product so much they keep hitting our product gates and upsell themselves because they need more support. Great. Like, we should probably go get more of those. Or the other interesting thing to think through is not just because I've actually been very pleasantly surprised. We're about 2 years into building Scrappy ABM. We started doing an NPS survey in December. We have really happy customers. We get a lot of 9s and a lot of 10s, which is like awesome. Not all the time. We have a couple of detractors and we are working through that. But like, most of our customers are actually really happy. That said, we don't actually get a referral from every 9 or 10 customer. But there's like literally 3 customers that have sent like 25% of our current customer base. Like, oh, that's interesting. They may not be the highest profit, but shoot, they refer the most and actually give us other high profit customers. So what are the trends within those kinds of customers? So that's all going to come from your CS and potentially sales teams. So you back it all the way out to simple thought process: profit from finance, happiness from CS, utilization from product, ease of sale and high sales value, And an easy way to look at this within the context of your CRM is look at the deals that have the most associated contacts, because they essentially typically multi-thread themselves. It's like we had a sales call earlier today where we had one person on the first call and she looped in 10 other people. So CMO, 2 VPs of BD, like brand, CS leadership, sales leadership, ops leadership. When we had like half the C-suite on the call for a second call, it was amazing. So I'm like, well, I want more of those. And then you go to marketing, and what marketing is going to provide is market size. So I give you this context because our happiest customer that has sent the most referrals and is our highest profit customer is a one-of-one customer. I wish I could find more of him, but I can't. So I'm not going to build my business around that one. So it's not any one department that's got the full picture. It's all departments coming together that give you the full picture, which also gets your leadership team aligned around it and your sales team bought in to close it. So if you can nail targeting, you kind of figure out the other things along the way.
Makes sense. One thing that you pointed out at the very beginning was there are certain companies that aren't a good fit for ABM, right? So maybe you can talk a little bit about that as somebody listening to this right now who is being told maybe by their leadership, hey, we need to do ABM, and they're trying to figure out how to get started. They've been told, you don't have any budget, you don't have any tools, but go out there and figure this thing out. Maybe the first question that they should ask is this the right strategy for us to even do in the first place? So what does that look like? Like, what is the ideal type of company that should be doing ABM versus one that maybe should be thinking about doing something else?
Such a good question. And I'm going to go ahead and tease a couple of things out. I am like 90 pages deep into building an ABM maturity model that's like a true objective view of like, how do you actually go from, am I even a fit, to like scaled operational excellence with like a center of excellence in your ABM program. So like more to come on that. If you want to keep up to date, scrappyabm.com/newsletter, just go subscribe. We'll send it out when it's ready. In short, it's B2B companies. So I think that everybody listening, but just in case you're B2C, hey, we can be friends. I don't have anything for you. Dedicated sales team. And this is not the founder. Please, 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 if you're a founder, don't do ABM. Please, for the love of God, do not do it. You will not be successful. Can guarantee. I don't do ABM. Like, as a founder, I hired a salesperson and now we're doing ABM because it's so regimented around a process, and founders don't like being confined to processes. That's why you're a founder. You break things. ABM doesn't need to be followed. So do not do it if you're a founder. Sorry, some PTSD on that one. Larger sales size. So typically a 50K ACV, which stands for average contract value, unless you are in a very niche focused space. And we're typically looking at a minimum threshold of like 30. The example is we had a client that had a total addressable market of 500 companies because they sold compliance software to government run utilities above a certain size. So like 500 total in the US. That was it. We were talking about doing an event. And they're like, yeah, we could call everybody in 3 days. I was like, yeah, you should do ABM. It would be clear product market fit. So this is a very hot take. I don't think you should use ABM to go up market, because by definition, by going up market, you're going to a new market where you don't know if you have product market fit. So like,
interesting.
Go to where you know you can actually win more. That's best customer. And then typically a significant expansion motion and a larger sales 20 days plus. Those are typical criteria. There's a lot more we could dig into, but at a high level, if you don't match that, proceed with caution. There are companies that are the exception that have had massive success with ABM that don't match that criteria, but it's a vast generalization for a call like this or a conversation like this. That's what we're typically leading into.
I've got one follow-up question. It's actually not my question. It's Al, who's one of our listeners here. Because you mentioned, high ACV is an important criteria for determining that you should do ABM. So how does PLG play into this, right? And it's something I actually, as he asked the question, I'm like, that's a really good question. I have never even thought about that. Like, if you're a PLG, generally your starting point is probably pretty low ACV. So does it make sense to do an ABM program from a PLG program? Have you seen that work?
Such a great question. We have a client that is actually our longest standing ABM client, that PLG motion. So I talk with them all the time. Actually, I was talking with them right before this. So the way that we think through it is their ACV is correct. Like their actual average contract value for year one is $6,000. So it's like, why did they run an ABM? Well, they are typically used for a small pilot program. And then once the pilot program's been adopted, they roll out from a team of 30 to a team of like 10,000. This client has a direct partnership with Meta. And like Meta uses them. So Meta uses them for every client or every employee, and they're a per seat approach. So like if you have a low ACV but a massive expansion opportunity, and ACV stands for average contract value. So like thinking year one average contract in a PLG motion, that's typically relatively low on year one, but you scale through utilization. So think of average as average customer lifetime value in your context. If there's a significant lifetime value for the client, it is worth the upfront investment to get them. And then you have to just have a really great expansion approach on the back end of the sale to actually get that value extracted from the customer. So that's how I think about it. And then the PLG approach, I actually think works super well because the goal of ABM is to decrease risk for your buyers and how they're thinking about using your product or your service. You typically do that through same logos and logos in the same vertical, case studies, anything along those lines. The PLG motion, you just literally give them access to the tool and say, here's how companies in your space are actively using this tool right now. Here's a free trial. Do you want to like see it for yourself? So you're decreasing risk, but again, recognizing we've got to have the expansion motion on the backside.
Awesome. That reminds me of how we used to talk about lifetime value as total opportunity value or total opportunity number, right? So the other thing that comes to mind too is like depending on how you define PLG, right? So I think one follow-up question I might have for Al is like, well, how are you defining PLG? Is it like self-serve credit card swipes, $50 a month? In that case, I think Mason, you'd argue that if that's kind of the lifetime value, or it doesn't meet a sort of threshold, then maybe it's not great. But if you're using PLG, like you sort of articulated, which is like an entry point, right? Then I see it as another door, like a side door, another channel into the house, right?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Because final follow-up thought on PLG sometimes, especially for selling into the enterprise, they often can't do a PLG motion just due to the IC and security risks that are associated. So sometimes you just have to go enterprise and have an ABM motion to get those large.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I love the interactive demos. Admittedly, I was in the space a couple years ago, and we're a big fan of that type of technology. So I'll tag a couple solutions here in for the folks out there, so you can see some of these interactive demos. But real quick, in terms of tools, it's actually a good segue into my next question is like, if you had to think about sort of, some very basic tools, resources, that sort of stuff, and absolutely please plug Scrappy ABM's content in here. But if you were to share those, what would sort of those basic kind of MVPs kind of be? And do you have like I know this is hard, but just for the folks out there, kind of a budget to start to think about when they're getting started?
Yeah. So a couple of immediate thoughts. One would be just a CRM and marketing automation platform. Those are absolutely essential. I actually think you can build most of your first ABM program if you've been in business for a minute, based on your existing database. So if you just segment your current audiences into best fit customers based on your current available data, you can get started. That typically looks like often an ABM program that's focused on close lost customers or customers that have previously churned that you'd like to win back. So those are just two really good starting points that you have all of the current available data on to engage. Inevitably, you will need to expand your data set. And there's a couple ways you can do that. So you can just go straight to data enrichment to get the data on these companies and accounts, which probably is the best route long term. And then the other approach is you just run marketing programs that actually get you data on the companies that you would want to work with. So again, if you, for example, use something like a sales nav, where you actually have a list of companies that match your area. Sales nav is $1,000 a year for basic license. and then you just use that list in Sales Nav as a way of actually segmenting the accounts that you're looking for, and then you run a paid media program through LinkedIn for the departments and the titles and the job functions that you're looking for, and then you have something like a lead gen form for LinkedIn, then you can actually just get the contacts that way. So again, at the end of the day, you need to expand your data set inevitably. How you do that, tons of different ways, but start with your existing available data and then expand into a data enrichment platform. As far as a starting budget, I mean, I ran our ABM program for like $1,000 a month. And that was just a really cheap ABM program that largely used podcasts, because the podcast tech stack is like $50 a month, but you have an 80% booking rate for a podcast interview. So like, for example, you guys reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to join us like office hours? And I said, sure. And that was the extent of like the board, and now I'm here. So like, you can build relationships that way. And we're doing that for ourselves. So like, our account executive has a podcast. He's doing 10 interviews a week with our ICP. And just through that, they're like 15-minute episodes. They're super easy. He's developing really, really great relationships that may not convert today, but what I can guarantee is that people know we exist and we're nice and we're knowledgeable. And when they need help with ABM, they typically call us first, even if it's not to buy, but it's just to get advice. And I'd rather have that all day long. So that is high level thought process on like the required tech stack. I can get away with $1,000 a month, but you might be able.
Awesome. Well, just real quick, a comment or follow up from Al. He says, I see a lot of companies that land 1 to 5K ACV paid with credit card, so POG makes sense. Then later expands to that 20 to 50K or more. So I think that's kind of what Mason was.
Exactly what I was thinking.
Awesome. I know we're coming up on time here, and there's just so much information, but we want to respect everyone's schedule. Justin, maybe you can take us home here with some final questions.
Yeah, I guess, I have a ton of questions here, but I'll have to pick one. And the one I think is the one that maybe a lot of people are asking out there, which is, how are you seeing AI being used in ABM, right? Like, we talk a lot about AI in many different use cases. I'm just curious from an ABM perspective. I'm sure there's a lot of different ways that AI is being used, but how are you seeing it most successfully being used?
Yeah, I can just share exactly what I'm doing. So it's primarily focused on research and content creation. I do not think that you should use an AI SDR right now. Admittedly, they're primarily spam cannons. So like, there's a couple there. Great AI SDR, but it's actually factoring together so much data and signals to then highly personalize and nuance that outbound. So unless you're using user gems, which they're not paying me, I really like the tool, or anything that's more than just, hey, here's a thing, I would not use AI as an outbound agent right now. I think it will get there, but we're not there yet. So I would use it primarily for research purposes. And for content creation. What I mean by content creation is like, hey, I have this content asset. How do I turn this content asset into an engaging outbound sequence that then is a starting point? And then you get a starting point based on the content asset. And then your SDR team should nuance and personalize and actually punch it up to make it reflective of what the audience is looking for.
Awesome.
Makes total sense. Yeah.
By the way, I tagged user gems and a couple of tools there. Mason, thank you so much, brother. It's awesome to see you. I know I met you in person in New York. Man, this was a little over a year ago, and then Golden Hour, and we shared a mutual customer, and it was awesome. And I felt so awesome as a founder. You know how it is when someone's like, I know you. You're like, really? Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
People know us outside of our parents. Anyways, well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And for the folks out there, we'll wrap up quickly. If you haven't checked out Scrappy ABM, absolutely do so. All the stuff that we talked about here, we know you don't have time to do these things, so you can absolutely hire, if you'd like, Mason's crew out there. They're awesome to do this stuff. If you haven't checked out AssetMule, go ahead and check it out. Go to assetmule.ai. It's free to get started. We have a freemium kind of model, right? So very easy. And if you are an existing customer, we really, really appreciate it. Check out our content. Follow us here on LinkedIn. Click on that follow button. Also subscribe on YouTube if you like our content. If you don't, no, that's okay too. Either way, have a wonderful, wonderful day.